Today in the White House, we have perhaps the worst and most dangerous president in the history of our country.
Senator Bernie Sanders firing up nearly 4,000 of his supporters and urging them to take down President Trump's agenda. Speaking at the second annual People's Summit, Sanders ripped the president's, quote, incredible hypocrisy. Many progressives outside Washington are now building upon that energy and increasing their calls to impeach Trump. That includes billionaire, Democratic donor and environmentalist Tom Steyer, who just penned a scathing letter to lawmakers, and it reads in part, quote, impeachment of an elected president is an act of enormous magnitude that must not be undertaken lightly or in response to routine political disagreements or policy differences. But the seriousness of the remedy speaks not only to the danger of its misuse, but to the importance of using it when appropriate. Tom Steyer joining me right now. So, Tom, good to see you. You say Republicans are not living up to their own standards of impeachment. What exactly do you mean, and what have you heard in response?
Well, the Republicans have made a deal with the devil in regards to President Clinton, and in 1974 with regards to President Nixon. There were absolute standards where obstruction of justice was a clear cause for impeachment of a president. And some of the very Republicans who are in Congress now drew a line in the sand and said, if you obstruct justice as the president, that is something that absolutely deserves impeachment. And now they are acting as if they've never said it, as if the rules don't apply to them, and as they are tied to President Trump and his behavior from here on out if they, in fact, don't hold him to account.
Meantime, it's House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi who is warning Democratic lawmakers to slow down on talk about impeachment. Listen.
When that word comes up, I always say to my colleagues in the Congress and my constituents and people across the country what I said before. Anything you do has to be based on data, evidence, facts. So you can speculate, but it's got to be the law and the facts.
All right, so many Democrats are echoing Pelosi. So are your calls for impeachment premature?
I think, as a matter of fact, if you consider obstruction of justice a cause for impeachment, there's absolutely no question that happened based simply on the public statements of President Trump himself, who said the reason that he fired former FBI Director Comey was because of the Russian investigation. The fact of the matter is we have prima facie evidence that he has obstructed justice. He's admitted it himself. And so if that is the basis, which it has historically been in the last two impeachment proceedings for going forward or impeaching a president, then he is guilty. He absolutely should be impeached. I have also called for an independent prosecutor to go out and find out exactly why he's impeding the Russian investigation. We don't know. But actually, we do have evidence that he has obstructed justice, and that is the Republicans' line in the sand for what causes impeachment.
So have you had a response from your letter, Democrats or Republicans?
Well, I mean, I've had responses directly to me from Democrats, and they have been overwhelmingly positive, saying somebody needs to say this. We need to call for this. The fact of the matter is we can't sit back and let this go on and act as if just because the Republicans won't do anything about it, that's okay, that we have to have a voice that is holding people to account to do the right thing.
All right, so let me ask you about something else that's near and dear to your heart, and it's climate change and President Trump's recent withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. Several businesses, city mayors, governors across this country have said that they still want to honor the agreement in their cities and in their states. But if, as a whole, the U.S. is not on board, meaning being led by the president, do you feel like that there would be an impact?
Oh, I think there's no doubt that this was a disastrous decision, and that people around the world, including business people and elected officials in the United States, have rushed in to try to mitigate the damage that the president did to our country and to our working families.
And in fact, many of those business leaders in those cities, that I mentioned, they've said that they want to continue to honor the Paris, Climate Accord. But how do they do that? How does, the world recognize their efforts if you have the president of the United States who's saying, we're withdrawing as a nation?
Well, I think you have to break down what it means to reduce greenhouse gases. I mean, two of the very important ways that we emit greenhouse gases is through the generation of electricity. That's usually what people talk about when they're talking about coal-fired plants, natural gas plants, or solar and wind. And that is something that is, by and large, regulated on a state basis. So when governors and mayors talk about generating electricity, that is something over which states have an enormous amount of control. When we talk about greenhouse gases coming from transportation, especially from cars, that's something that tends to get regulated on a national basis. And so there is a great leadership possibility there that's traditionally been led by California and other progressive states about the miles per gallon rules. But the fact of the matter is that is something where the president can have impact, is talking about trying to reduce projected miles per gallon rules in a way that would create more greenhouse gases, make us more dependent on fossil fuels, and keep us from building the kind of clean America that would create a lot of new jobs and make Americans healthier.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Tom Steyer, thanks for being with us.
Frederica, thank you.